As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner YouGov offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. Fnatic in the news. Everyone knows esports team and brand Fnatic. And the headline here is esports brand Fnatic raises $17 million for Asia expansion. Basically, they talk about how the investment will accelerate Fnatic's growth in the Asia-Pacific market with a new strategic partnership that will incorporate the expansion of Fnatic's base of operations in Japan and support for its Rainbow Six Siege team, which plans to relocate to the country. And so let me just tell you what I thought was interesting about this. It's not so much the size of the investment or what they're doing with the money. It's the where I thought was very interesting, that this was more Japan-focused and not China-focused, or at least China-centric, when you're talking about expansion into Asia. I don't know if you guys have thoughts specifically on that, or on this financing, or how you guys feel about how Fnatic fits into the team ecosystem in general from a business standpoint. Anyone have thoughts on this?
I mean, Fnatic, to my understanding, Fnatic has headquarters in London, right? So they're already more worldly, I think, than other orgs because they're not in the United States, and they understand the importance of the UK, of Europe, of Asia, of Latin America on the esports market. All of these places obviously have thriving esports scenes, and I really think the only limitation, honestly, is outdated infrastructure and lag for the competitors, right? Where you have a lot of people saying we just don't have the resources to compete at the speeds that North America and certain places in Asia have. So for starters, just Fnatic being where they are, I think they're going to look at things differently than the rest of us. And I think I told you this once before, Paul. My very first meeting in esports with FaZe Clan, I asked I looked Greg Soko, the former president, in the eye, and I just go, "How are you guys not in China right now or in Asia right now? What are the plans there?" And they didn't have a great answer for me at the time. And that brings me to your question just now, which is, well, this is really Japan, not China. So, I want to do a little quick off-the-cuff research right now in the middle of the talk to figure out the numbers behind Japan to see what justifies it. I applaud the move to Asia because it's a dominant esports area. You see people like Gen G that are bridging the gap between Western and Eastern esports. But as for the Japan question, I don't have that answer for me right now. We could pose some theories there.
Yeah. I mean, apart from the financials, which I'm not too well versed in for specifically Japan, I do know that, in the past few years, they repealed that gambling law, which prevented a lot of esports tournaments from even taking place in the first part. And apart from that, like, Japan had already, even with that law in place, had been producing powerhouses in multiple different game titles. With those restrictions in place. So now with those gone, we're seeing them pop off in Rainbow Six Siege, especially Apex Legends. They're dominating Twitch on that front. And in Valorant as well, we're seeing a really, really large interest there. And so just looking at those three titles alone, you can see that I think it's smart to forecast that within the next couple of years, Japan will definitely be on the up and up in terms of esports importance. And I think a gaming influence overall too, right? Like, whenever we look at Twitter analytics or like a year in review for gaming, Japan is always at the top of Twitter trends. And I think that's something that's not going to change. And it's only a matter of time until, this sort of globalization happens with what's going on in gaming in Japan and really hitting this side of the world.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen a trend that Japan is, esports is growing there. And obviously there's good things happening. And we've done lots of stories about new things coming out of Japan. And I wonder how much of Fnatic just looked at this and said, if we're looking at the curve, right, the growth curve, Japan is still lower down on that curve than China, and so there's just more opportunity for growth here, right? Like, everyone knows China's a huge market for esports. Everyone who has a team or something is doing something there, and so Japan maybe just seemed more differentiated as a strategy? Maybe they felt there was more white space.
Yeah, I also think an important part to look at and not ignore is the cultural aspect of it, just because the Japanese aesthetic is prevalent throughout esports and gaming. It is probably the most popular thing. Just, this neon, that's like the Tokyo lighting, you know what I mean? Everything from there. So Fnatic already with their rebrand in this past year, already looking a little more edgy, a little more future-based. They've already started putting out streetwear. They already have their own merch. It makes sense to go to Japan. You're going to want to immerse yourself in the local culture. If you've got streetwear shoots from Japan coming out on weekly, these drops are being photographed in Shibuya, like the most iconic places you can imagine. I think in terms of cultural influence, Fnatic really could be looking for a resurgence, right? Because Fnatic back in the day, early 2000s, they were the team. Not so much in the past couple of years. Where have they gone? They've rebranded now. Maybe this new side of the new era of Fnatic is Japanese. Like maybe that's the new thing that's going to be coming around. So I think there's something there.
Lindsay, if you buy Jimmy M's point, right, then it proves sort of the whole narrative around esports teams as media companies more than anything else, right? Like it's just, if they're worried more about cultural impact and, content in the right places and locales, you know what I mean? Like, does this confirm it for you if you buy that point?
Oh yeah, that I think has been something that we've seen more of a trend, and now adopting kind of popular culture and Japanese streetwear and all that stuff in a rebranding just proves it even more, for sure.
And to add to that, as someone that talks with a lot of teams, that does a lot of work with a lot of teams, the first thing they bring up to me is not how good their team is in this sport or that. It's, wait till you see the content or this that we're putting out, something about their culture and their life. I think that cultural perspective, Jimmy, was right, spot on. Japan as a cultural hub for so many things, fashion inclusive, and now esports, it's a great bet.
Cam says, love the Asia move, would love to learn about why Japan. Well, there you go, Cam. You just heard it. Let me just touch on the financing here for a second. They raised $17 million. They had previously raised a bunch of money. I think their total financing now is up to 35 million, something like that. 30 plus million. No, sorry, 53 million to date. 53 million to date. So this latest round, 17 million. I had a question regarding, if you guys remember, the Fnatic's last financing round was sort of very broadly publicized because they crowdfunded. In other words, they opened it up so that anyone could, I think it was like $100 or something you could invest on these crowdfunding sites to own a piece of Fnatic, however those crowdfunding sites structured it, right? And it seemed, at least to me, like Fnatic was going to go down this path of crowdfunding forever. Like I didn't see why they wouldn't, right? Their crowdfunding was successful. People got excited about it. It got a lot of press. Why do you think this round was not crowdfunded? Like, why do a very traditional round with, a large investor essentially, after you've done this sort of crowdfunded round, does it make it seem like the crowdfunded round was more just like a PR stunt?
Maybe PR, maybe a combination of smart money and dumb money, right? And people that know that there's a lot of hype here and want to get involved, but don't know more beyond that. Some parallels to crypto, perhaps.
I mean, why not do another crowdfunding, Jimmy? Yeah. Jimmy B.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound more like the original crowdfunding, which or was more of a PR stunt, right? And was more to capture, a lot of these teams are just trying to capture the quick buck, right? They don't want to answer all the questions that a more astute investor would throw at them. They just want money to do what they want to do. This round seems more strategic, right? A specific dollar amount for a specific purpose in a specific market. It seems much more tailored, like they finally caught some breathing room or got their heads above water and said, okay, now what do we want to do with this?
I mean, let me put my tinfoil hat on. Let me just press a bit, right? Like, it means either, I could read into this, right? And I could say, it means either they believed that they couldn't crowdfund again, that maybe the hype has died down, right? Or they believe that crowdfunding, like people weren't going to get excited about their story, or that some like now individual investors were offering somehow better terms, or like, you know what I mean? Because a crowdfunding campaign arguably is probably the cheapest quote unquote money you could get, right, as a company. I'm not sure about the implications of this, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but like, could it mean that maybe there wasn't a market for them to crowdfund a $17 million round this time? I don't know if you guys have.
I like your thought on that they couldn't do it again, right? That maybe it just wasn't going to happen. What I think also though is that when you go to a specific VC or a group, you know, there's strategic implications involved, right? You have that guy not just for their money, but for other doors that they can open, other companies that they've invested in that they can plug you into. So I do like the thought, or I do follow the thought that maybe they wouldn't be able to generate the same type of hype. But I think more so, you know, if they're really trying to make a strategic play here and do something specific in this region, that perhaps where the money's coming from also has other abilities, right? That other doors, introductions, additional funding. If things go well, don't go anywhere else, come back to us and we'll double down on our investment, right? Certain securities, I think, that are not represented in just this $1 amount.
Yeah, and I also
Sorry,
think
go ahead,
that,
Jimmy.
sorry, I also think that they just had plans and they wanted to execute and maybe couldn't wait for the whatever the amount of the crowdfunding period was, right? They were like, we need to go, like, let's execute now.
Yeah. Ramsey asked a good question. Any news on the investors maybe have ties to Japan? Yeah, sorry, right. Ramsey, I didn't mention that. The majority investor, maybe I should, it's totally relevant to the question I asked, was Marubeni, which is a like huge Japanese conglomerate. So like,
There you go.
but it does beg there is an interesting sort of side question there, which is, are they going to Japan because, again, they have conviction around the Japanese market, or are they going to Japan because that's where the investor who was willing to write a huge check wants them to go? Right? It's a chicken, like which one's the chicken, which one's the egg here, right?
Yeah,
like,
Probably with a mix of both too. Particularly if they're going through a rebrand, this is a good opportunity to really go full tilt with the rebrand. So
yeah, I wish I was, you know, if I knew sort of the inside story here, which is, did Fnatic go out and seek a huge Japanese investor because they're saying, we believe in the future of esports in Japan, right? Which would be an interesting take in and of itself, right? That would, from an industry perspective. Or did some Japanese investor come to them and say, hey, you know, we want you to do more esports in Japan, so here's a bunch of money, right? Like,
right. Like, what came first? There are signs to prove the former were, as in, right, the Rainbow Six Siege League. They had Team Empire coming out of Japan year after year, and Ubisoft, you know, a couple of years into the league taking place, did this thing where they actually sold in-game stickers so that the contribution for the stickers and the charms would go towards the prize pool and towards the teams that you were, you know, buying the in-game item for. And Empire got a lot of support from Japan and a lot of support in general on their cosmetics. So there was financial success, you know, in a way, right, through the Rainbow Six Siege League. So it's not a huge indicator, but you have that. You have Apex Legends. Like, people kind of underestimate, I think, Apex on Twitch. Like, the biggest streamer for Apex on Twitch is Japanese by and far, by almost nearly 100,000 hours watched. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. And we don't see them streaming because it's at 7, 8, 9 a.m., right? Like, I would wake up at ungodly hours and just hop on Twitch, and there they are, without a doubt, 4, 5, 6 rows of Japanese streamers dominating Apex. I don't know. I genuinely believe this company, too, this conglomerate, probably sees the future success of esports in the nation as well. And I think Fnatic as a whole just has a brand already in Japan as being this old school European cool, right? This is the primo. This is the cream of the crop of esports from back in the day. So maybe to Lindsay's point, too, like, maybe they're going for the full rebrand and just going full charge ahead. So who knows?
I would love to believe that they just have such conviction around Japan, because that that's so like a whole interesting discussion, right? And then if they're right, that's a whole other interesting discussion, right? Like, if we see Japanese esports really take off in a major way, and you go, wow, these guys were smart, they saw it, right? Like they saw the signs. I guess time will tell.